Here's a number every HR should notice. Up to 70% of international assignments fail, not because of poor technical skills and not because of bad performance, but because of the emotional and psychological factors that most companies never even ask about. Now, these can be cultural isolation, identity loss, family strain. I'm just naming a few of them, but that's during an assignment. Now, imagine what happens when there's a layoff. When the job ends, it's not just the job that goes. For an expat, losing a role can mean losing a visa, a community, a sense of belonging, and very quietly, a sense of self. The direct cost of a failed expat assignment can reach up to $1 million. But the human cost, that's missing. And yet, that outplacement package the companies provide was almost certainly built for someone else entirely. Hi, my name is Tanja with TPTalks Working Global. And today we're talking about the emotional and the psychological toll of being laid off in a foreign country. What it actually does to a person and what companies urgently need to understand and change. Today, I'm joined by Ivana Mrgan, clinical psychologist, a licensed psychotherapist with over 15 years sitting across from globally mobile professionals going through exactly this. She sees what the outplacement checklists miss. So, hello, Ivana, and welcome. How
Because
are
she
you?
was. And I'm kind of slightly smiling, not because of the content, because it is grave, but the way you delivered it is very, comprehensive and well-rounded and so important. So thank you for focusing on this.
My pleasure, and I think it's important that we don't hear enough of. So, to start off, you work specifically with expats and globally mobile professionals going through transition. How did you end up in this job? Tell us your story.
Probably stems from part of the identity of an immigrant as well.
Okay.
Expat. I'm a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist. Lived abroad for more than 10 years in a country where 90% of people were residents, not nationals.
Oh,
So this was my bread and butter in terms of people that I tend to kind of see, global leaders that I tend to cooperate in, HR departments that we're also all serving as. And in a sense, as you described, yeah, there's kind of a hidden risks and really kind of a return of investment leakage all around that. And most importantly, it's not individualized in terms of the needs that people have, expats and immigrants alike, where they are laid off.
okay. So you got there because you were yourself feeling it and you felt like, okay, something has to be done, or am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, because predominantly that would be the work that we'll be focusing on while working abroad as consultants, as counselors and psychologists. If you're specifically focused on a group of people that are residents, so in that sense, that would be my population anyway. And beside that population, one portion of that will be kind of then designated to people that were laid off in international context.
Okay. So from what you see in your work on the ground in the sessions, what are the top three challenges that expats face during transition when they're laid off that most HR teams miss?
Um, what I'm frequently seeing is because you have multiple transitions when you're onboarding and when you're relocating in terms of personal transition, social transition, and work transition. And all three areas are equally kind of decimated or challenged and transformed where you're laid off, if it makes sense. So it's kind of more complex than layered in international context where you're back home, where you have other, let's say, support systems that would kind of buffer the blow. That's one portion of it. Other bit is sometimes global mobility is a part of the process, but not strategically aligned
Would you
with other processes in the company. So that would be more kind of a administrative, let's say, standards and set of principles to follow, less, let's say, aligned with other, let's say, taxation system, financial system, visa system. So it will be like kind of a checklist that you need to go through, less the system that is designed to support the wholeness of a person. In a point when you're currently both the employer, the securer of the visa, probably paying, let's say, school fees, where maybe your relocation expenses also depend on you. So everything is quite concentrated and then laid out as a kind of like a rug from out, from your feet. And all of that in quite a short period of time. Sometimes frequently, you have a period to leave that will be extended to 30 days. So all the process is also quite shortened, and all the phases that people would go through are quite intensive. At the same time, after the initial shock, as you would expect, executive functioning kind of is challenged. So critical thinking, focusing, working memory, all of this is in danger while you need to navigate very complex situations and decisions in a very short period of time. So I don't think that's visible enough in the system and not accounted for enough during, the HR processes that would account for that.
Now, would you say that this is pretty much present whether the expat is onboarding or offboarding, or it's the same?
Yes, yes, because you go through multiple parallel process of adjustments that all happen in the same time. And similar is true when you're kind of repatriating or traveling to some other country, finding either another job or trying to find a job in the same country that you're currently resident of.
Okay. Okay. Can you walk us through a little bit about maybe, I don't know if this exists, but can you walk us through kind of the stages of when the person finds out they're being laid off until the moment they're leaving? What is the emotional, psychological stages that they're going through? And at what point do they come and see you?
It can be and literally is frequently perceived as a kind of almost a critical incident because it hits the whole system, not just the specific person, but family visa is affected. In that sense, the spouse, the children, if there are any dependents, healthcare expenses, relocation expenses, and all of the life that you need to kind of adjust for and prepare back in your home country as well, in a sense. So first bit is general shock,
Right?
and then kind of a recuperating, picking up the pieces, where it's very important that it's a kind of a continuous, limited step-by-step communication between the HR department and the person. Even maybe having, standards and practices put in space and extended periods of time of contact in terms of like, this week this needs to happen, do you need support or help regarding that, providing information or advice if possible regarding taxation, because that would affect tax residency. It will affect a visa. There's this kind of a idea that maybe sometimes you have a split families packages, or maybe trying to find a job in this space. So facilitating these transition and kind of a not walking hand by hand, but facilitating this initial blow and shock while the person is able to kind of get back online and do their best that they can in terms of being effective adult specialists that they are. But at first, they're quite dependent on the packages that are provided by the company.
Okay. And so, wow, I mean, I just have like 10,000 questions coming out and shooting out of my mouth, in my mind is that so those expats or those globally mobile employees, um, how can I say this? At what point do they come and see you? Is it pretty early or is it kind of close to the end? Those that, of course, mind you, we're talking about those privileged ones that get the package, because not everybody gets this type of package, right? If you want to talk about this a little bit, and at what point they come in to seek your assistance.
Yes, because kind of operational things are overwhelming and never ending in a sense. They usually would kind of reach out when they're back to their home country or either relocated in some other country. Because the idea is the stress and the strain is a bit overbearing. So you would kind of run on fumes, and you get to be aware of the full effect after the fact. That then kind of impairs your possible effectiveness on a new job. um, in a sense, it can leave a bad taste in your mouth in terms of like employer branding, and also reflect on the retention policies of the firm as well. Because people would be like, what is happening? I needed something else that didn't happen. I'm not sure exactly what it was, but I wasn't on the receiving end of what I see as optimal. So in a sense, both kind of maybe taking care of the relationship, business relationship with the company and maintaining this, kind of a goodwill,
Mhm.
but also kind of having enough capacity if you're making a transition to making it with your own kind of rules in mind, having enough resources to spend them on something new and adjust again. And that needs to be facilitated, obviously, from both sides. But a personal aspect of it is so important because predominantly when you're kind of in the host country, company would be kind of taking care of, the social networks predominantly are linked with job. Your life as a whole, the housing allowances, friends that you kind of get to see, content that you kind of get to extend to is quite literally kind of a swept off your feet in a way. And in that sense, although there's not sole responsibility, there needs to be a kind of a psychological contract of what it means for a person. Plus, for global mobility, not to be a set of processes, but something that is integrated in terms of managing global talents and forming a retention policy that is sustainable, even when the layoffs are present.
Okay, so here I hear you talking a lot about the companies and what the companies should do, but when it comes to the expats themselves, at what point do they come and see you? I mean, first of all, I bet they have to have the funding, and okay,
Yes.
so that either happens or doesn't happen. And when they do have the support and the funding, do they come right away, or is it basically when they have to leave? At what period? Let's say that their layoff was announced today, and they have to leave in a month's time, and they have the support to see you. Are they coming day number 1, day number 15, day number 30? And how intense is that shock when you have to deal with this with this expat?
I would say it also depends how long the person was in the country.
Okay,
So psychological professionals and social kind of a transition can last up to 2 years when you enter the country. So some people are even laid off before they're able to feel their feet and feel comfortable in the shoes of an expat, if it makes sense. Because some of the international assignments last between 2 and 5 years. And some of them are on the beginning stages or just kind of finding their feet.
right.
So it is then exacerbated, and it's a kind of double whammy. And then where they're kind of a more strained, more under duress, and their sense of self is also frequently impacted, obviously, because you'll be here at home, you're managed, and find kind of a job that really is fulfilling your life goals, and then everything is in shambles. So that's one type of client that I get to see. Frequently, it will be in under the 6 months when they relocate or return to their home country, because then operational things are settled. You get your kind of tax residency taken care of. All the papers, kids are in schools, you're found housing or return to your own house and kind of get settled into the maybe routines. But then kind of stress kind of whams you because you were functioning because you needed to. People usually kind of unravel when there's a phase of like, okay, what's next?
Okay. And
So people that are still in adjustment phase and then need to readjust are most in risk. Plus, it depends on the social system back home. When you're relocating and repatriating, people around you frequently kind of are not aware that stress that you go through might be similar or even more intensive
right.
upon return in comparison to where you were relocating. So they're underserved, so sort of kind of in terms of kind of a social support that is a buffer for stress. And at the same time, they would frequently not expect this to hit them so hard, and it frequently does.
It's an interesting point that you mentioned, and I have to say I experienced this myself because, being
There you
expatriate
go.
and coming
Well, I'm
coming
not
back.
glad, obviously, but case in point, in a way, lived experience speaks for that.
Yeah, it's no, and I have to say, this is so important to know because yeah, it's like an adventure. You're going out there on an adventure and you're ready for the adventure. You have that honeymoon phase and then you're getting settled, be it within an expat community or outside. And then, things happen that sometimes we have no control on, and then you gotta do a U-turn and go back home. And you think that going back home is gonna be the same as you left it, where in fact things have changed and you're like, oh my gosh, where do I start? So yeah, I felt when I went back, I felt like a complete stranger where I thought home was home. But yeah, it's an excellent point that you made.
Yeah, thank you. A bit unfortunate, but also human, because at the time being willing migrants, turn out to 3 to 4% globally. So it's still infrequent experience. So I think companies and people are still not ready or prepared pre-departure.
Hmm.
What would it all entail psychologically in terms of acculturation stress, in terms of kind of policies that needs to be instilled globally? So yeah, we're still in a learning curve, sort of, kind of, in terms of that.
How would that look like actually? If let's say you have an HR director or a CEO listening to this, how would that look like? What would you recommend, considering what you
Yeah.
just said? How would that look like to kind of say, okay, these expats are not just a number, but actually,
Yeah.
we're missing something, and we need to really provide. What would be ideally in your
Yeah.
the ideal world in your
I'm laughing because like just solving global mobility, just kind of a risk points, just to iron them out. Well, obviously I'm not a HR person, but I cooperate with some of them and also with leaders in global mobility. So in a sense, I think all phases of global mobility need to be accounted for in terms of pre-preparation when you're doing a selection or kind of a talent management to account for not just job related skills, but also intercultural skills, if it makes sense. Because not just traits, but disposition and communication and cooperation are so important as a predefining factor in terms of for a prognosis if somebody will succeed. Being a great expert is just one of them, but not the only one. So I would say managing it from the start in terms of embedding it in your selection process and talent engagement processes as well. Preparing people beforehand in terms of how cultural stress look like, what they can expect on these three different levels of transformation, social, work-wise. Same company in Dubai, let's say Sydney and Vancouver, they nominally have same culture, but they don't. And that's normal and that's okay. And that it's to be expected. And people are usually fine with that if they're prepped. I
Okay.
would say that would be very important in the beginning phases. Plus, ensuring that the family has this either dry run, for example, visiting a place that they will be relocating,
Uh-huh.
being in contact with the team beforehand. So it creates this kind of familiarity that they maybe have a kind of a buddy system put in place, somebody who will not just onboard them work-wise, but also in terms of kind of socializing and also culture. So they're not getting, kind of a printout or the PowerPoint presentation of what is expected in I don't know where.
Right.
So in that pre-phase. During, I would say people want to do well. That's in our nature. So
Right.
the idea we would usually overwork and engage heavily and not complain until we're not able to do that anymore. So I would say kind of close monitoring, not for micromanagement, but for support in a continuous manner, and that is reflexive and reflective in terms of that really kind of feeds into the loop of like, this is my experience, I might be needing this or that, and then ideally for this to be embedded in the work processes as well. So while it lasts. Plus, that obviously expectations and needs would be different depending if somebody is kind of a traveling solo or has a family. Sometimes it will be like letter that you can ensure for international school that you can attend to. Sometimes it will be a visa extension. So the idea is to be standardized, but also malleable to individual needs. Because then people kind of get this message of, okay, like this is not rigid, this is adjusted to my needs. I can feel safe during the assignment. Um, and obviously, having either kind of a counseling support or employer assistance program where you can kind of check in and reach out to people that have professional experience working with expats. And because this is a specific type of stress and specific risk factors for workability. So having that on board also is usually quite helpful. And then in the third phase, in terms of relocation or changing maybe a location of work, but staying in the same company, would be the kind of to follow up on that as well, to extend on it, to prepare it on time. Some people even would mention 6 months, 8 months before it really happens. So you have an intro, so you can kind of engage with it step by step. So when the time comes, you're already kind of supported and you feel kind of response able to kind of engage with a new phase, if it makes sense. And then checking in lately. I think it's also important for people that kind of stay in the company because that's a kind of a strategy how you strengthen the retention as well and the values that you communicate in terms of what happens with your global talent pool.
Absolutely. Here I'm just writing some keywords down. First of all, the fact that you said we humans by nature want to do good, and by complaining, we're already signaling that, we want to learn to do well and figure this space out to have a safe space. So I find that really important. And the fact that it also it doesn't start at outplacement, it starts at the beginning.
Yes.
So that way, if and when the day comes where people have to transition and leave, they don't leave all confused. They already have that support that's incredibly present. And that's what I'm hearing. Am I hearing this correctly, or?
Yeah, because it is specific, like I sound like Liam Neeson, specific set of skills, but specific specific stressors that if normalized, if accounted for, if monitored and worked through, are not they don't have to be a great risk for neither of the company or the person. And when that's communicated that it's normalized, people will reach out on time, not when they're on the end of the rope,
Right.
if it makes sense. So that's prevention. That's working on retention. So in a sense, I would say having in mind the amount of resources that frequently goes into international assignments, it would be a great deal of sense to act preventively. Plus, what it frequently comes with is this sense of privilege because global mobility, international assignments are frequently perceived as is either a promotion or reward for a job well done. So the idea is if it's a privileged position, I shouldn't be complaining, even if I'm suffering or not doing well.
Ooh,
So
tell
there's
more.
also internalized sense of kind of responsibility in terms of like if I'm struggling, it must be on me because company insured everything for everything and counted for everything. So normalizing that, communicating, checking in, and monitoring, and acting preventively early on when difficulties start, then kind of relieve this both for the person and for the company because if the need is not communicated, you're not able to kind of respond to it.
Okay.
Normalizing it from both ends facilitates change.
Oh, wow. You really mentioned a lot of interesting information here. And that communication, I think, is important because the person will know what's going on. Whereas if you're not communicating, or even if the person is not communicating, there's a lot of should haves that are happening, and that can be very unhealthy. Considering that, and I'm kind of going into the next question, is that considering that scenario, what would be important to include in this offboarding part? I mean, you've talked already about it should be happening at recruitment and selection, but let's say the company didn't do that, and we are talking offboarding, talking repatriation. What is something that just has to be present that you see always being absent when these
Mhm.
transitions happen?
Hmm.
across the
I
board.
would say continuity in communication, especially because that would be for a lot of people would come to, larger or lesser degree of shock. So they would seem receptive, but there's picture, there's no tone. So you need to be consistent with your messaging, and kind of creating a bit of kind of nuggets of information about
Right.
the next step in the process, and also kind of monitoring and aligning with the person. Is there something that they might be needing while you're following up on the process? Is it, kind of visa status? Um, is it the school fees? Is it your kind of a taxation residence and what it means for you now versus in 3 months, and how to navigate those? So I would say both finance and HR need to be aligned very well and communicate. Ideally, because it's very stressful to kind of switch bits and boats, it will be one contact person.
Okay, one contact person.
Um,
Okay.
Yeah, preferably an HR person that would then kind of align other parts of the process as well and communicate with an individual if possible. Because I noticed that this extra cognitive load and strain that comes with switching and then plugging in with different types of specializations
Right.
kind of strain you even more when you're already kind of struggling with finding your footing.
Okay.
I would say that would help. Plus, individualizing it as much as you can. Would it mean the letter to your school to reduce kind of a late fees? Is it extending on a visa so family they don't need to kind of have split uh, time away, because again you're without your social support system, and then if your family needs to return and you're still there, kind of tying all ends, you will be under more duress.
Mm-hmm.
So thinking strategically and kind of a buffering the support systems would be essential.
Interesting. You mentioned that it would be valuable for HR to have someone to
Align the
help
processes, yeah, to
to help
facilitate this.
okay, to help the expat. Now, I just now a question. This may happen, you know. The person said, "Oh, well, thank you very much. You're going to give me this offer. I'm going to see this therapist. Wonderful. But you're HR and you're paying me. How is that? How can that be a problem? And where the person is maybe not, the expat is not taking that full advantage because of confidentiality
Oh,
issues.
okay.
How do you deal with that?
Most of the companies that work internationally uh, cooperate with different platforms that would use and facilitate and provide employer assistance programs. So employer only communicates with the company, uh, not with the counselor per se. So neither of information is flowing back to the company because there's this kind of third party buffer where confidentiality is then kind of a part of the deal.
Right, because if you have someone that's in
But that's
HR,
one of the reasons, as you mentioned, that the uptake is quite low because people are worried about that. But in general, plus all the ethical guardrails are there, where somebody, as for example me, is not able to feed any information and shouldn't feed any information back to the employer.
okay, perfect. So yeah, you seal that safe space that you have
Yes.
provided to make sure that the person has what they need without ever having that confidentiality being broken, right? Right?
Yes, as you would have, let's say, for a critical incident, somebody has a heart attack and dies on the scene, and there would people kind of get in and offer services as well, debriefing plus individual counseling, and it's part of the package deal where confidentiality is a part of the provision.
Okay, all right. In your experience, that confidentiality, does it change across cultures and countries, or is it's a rule that's not negotiable?
I think companies that do global mobility well associate themselves with platforms that will secure that.
Okay.
The more stern guardrail or framework, legal framework, would be the rule of thumb. So nothing else. So it's kind of watertight. Um, so is it a HIPAA? Is it GDPR compliance? If you have offices all around the world, you would try and obviously kind of stand to the high standard that you can.
Yeah. So we're talking about really the expat who is experiencing a transition, a layoff, and also, as you said a little while ago, you actually have the people that are staying around watching this whole situation unfold, which basically shows the people who are staying around, well, is this how they're going to treat me type of a thing. And that this is where I wanted to kind of set the scene. If you could tell every HR director one thing they're missing right now in that scene, what would it be? I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
Yeah. No, I'm just um, thinking and being cautious about not seeming tone deaf by kind of enunciating like um, people-centered, people-centered, people-centered. At the same time, when I know procedures, regulations, limited number of teams and people that are employed by HR that need to kind of juggle it all.
Right.
Um, but I always say kind of a really take your time, especially in the beginning, and run through the whole process and then show up for the person whenever you see that they're maybe kind of struggling with one aspect or the other. Check in regularly to follow up on the process.
Check in. Hmm.
And see, is there a wiggle room for any of provisions or interventions that you can do that would facilitate the transition as much as you can, whatever is in your power. People will feel it and people would appreciate it. And again, I really do believe that it's also a retention strategy per se, because how you treat people that go, that's also messaging in terms of like the people that would kind of stay. Are we safe? Is our employer trustworthy?
Right.
And in that sense, that's both prevention and retention.
Hmm. Well, thank you so much, Ivana. I think we could go on and on and on with
Well,
this
I will
topic.
do hope, and obviously that's not ideal end of the assignment, but I think it can be a humane part of the assignment that would then kind of mm, support person if they're thinking about again moving abroad and working abroad, not to make it as a negative experience. Plus, to build up practices and standards for global mobility teams and HR departments of what works. Because again, we're not completely non-charted territories, but only 4% people would generally relocate. But I would say that we will see more of that. So having practices and standards put in practice means the world.
Okay. So communication, communication, and communication. This is what I hear.
Yeah. And being mindful about, how people function under the stress, and they would can seem fine and look fine and say that they're fine, but they're not.
Right.
And if you kind of take it for a face value, you would be on your end thinking that things are progressing nicely, where they're not.
Hmm. Very wise words. Thank you very much, Ivana. And do connect with her right here on LinkedIn or YouTube, wherever you're watching. We talk a lot about going global, international teams, global mobility, worldwide talent. But behind every one of those words is a person, someone who packed up their life, left behind what was familiar, and took a chance on a country and a company and a somewhat uncertain future. And when that ends abruptly, they don't just lose a job, they lose the ground beneath them. What you've reminded us today, Ivana, is simple but essential, that a person deserves to be seen, not as a process nor a budget line, but as a human being who took a real life risk and may be afraid to take another one if we get this wrong. We are all global now. How we treat people at their most vulnerable says everything about the world of work we are building right now. To everyone watching, share this conversation with someone who needs to hear it. Connect with Ivana. She's right here. And thank you for being here on TP Talks Working Global. Until next time, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye bye.